business, as always, is bill introductions, and I would like to recognize Representative Ballard. I don't think your microphone is on.
You would think I would know how to do this, right? My apologies. But I'll just say good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. I would like to introduce RS 0568, and it is a bill concerning property tax.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Would you care to elaborate on property tax a little bit? What does it do?
Sure, no secret to it. Actually, it was really based on time payments for a person 65 years and older, and I got a request from people, especially family members that were helping their parents pay their property taxes. They just wanted to know, and so in this case, this one is a fourth, and a fourth, through. If you have something to it, that's fine, but this was a group that asked me to do it, and I am doing it because I wanted to help them.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Thank you.
I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Representative Ellis next for a bill request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce RS 1161. This is a request to give a tax relief to an organization that helps low-income people that do not have insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid. This is to help people stay in their own homes as long as they can in the last weeks of their life. And when we raise money, we pay about $3,000 to $6,000 on our fundraisers. And all the money that goes directly to people that either buy their pain medicine or write notes, plan their funerals, things like that.
Thank you, Representative. Committee questions? Any objection to the request? Seeing none, the request is approved.
Thank you.
Committee, I also have a request for introduction. It is RS 0825. It is expanding the employer child care tax credit from 30% to 50%. In statute, it currently has a dollar limitation on it, and that dollar limitation has not even been close to what has been utilized, so we're looking to increase the available credit for that to see if we can get some more utilization. I would stand for questions. Seeing none, any objection to the request? Seeing none, the request is approved. Are there any other further bill introductions? Representative Awerkamp.
Mr. Chairman, sir, bill introduction of RS 1249. It's regarding the property valuation statements that go out annually and adding certain information regarding the effect of the valuation change to those statements.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Any objections? Seeing none, the request is approved. Any further bill requests for introduction? Seeing none, we will turn to our first item of business. Today we have a hearing on House Bill 2230. And I would turn first to the Revisor's Office for an overview of House Bill 2230.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2230 would impose sales tax on sales of digital property and subscription services. Pursuant to the bill, Section 1 is the definition section. 5 new terms are added. They would be applications, digital audio visual works, digital books, digital code, and digital property. If you look at the bill, it has a lot of kind of moving parts to it. Really what is going on there is the section has not been properly alphabetized over the years. So a lot of the changes are, just moving the sections around to get them in a nice alphabetized order. But there are 5 new definitions, which I just listed off. The remaining ones are currently in statute. Section 2 of the bill, I believe is close to the very end, would actually impose the sales tax on all sales of digital property and subscription services. The sales tax would apply regardless of whether the purchaser has the right to permanently use the property. The purchaser's right to access or retain the property is not permanent, or the purchaser's right to use is conditioned upon continued payment. So regardless of those circumstances, sales tax would be owed on such purchases. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, questions for the reviser? Seeing none, we will move on to the fiscal note. Do we have anyone from Department of Revenue that would like to direct? Oh, there we go. Looks like we have Kathleen.
Yes,
on the
Mr.
fiscal
Chairman. Members of the committee, this is Kathleen Smith with the Kansas Department of Revenue. House Bill 2230 would increase state revenues by $50.9 million in fiscal year 2022. Of that total, the state general fund would be estimated to increase by $42.7 million in fiscal year 2022. And the state highway fund is estimated to increase by $8.2 million in fiscal year 2022. In fiscal year 2023, that estimate would go up to $58.3 million, all funds, and in fiscal year 2024, $61.3 million, all funds. To formulate these estimates, what we did is we reviewed the industry data for music, books, video games, applications, streaming services, and based upon this $100 billion industry, this is the estimate that we came up with. With that, I would stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kathleen. Committee, questions? Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Kathleen. If I read this right, it says you'll need to hire 3 new FTEs and need a couple $100,000 for programming or updating your system.
That is correct, Representative Corbett.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none in the room and none online. Kathleen, thank you for your overview. This time I would like to turn to our proponent section on House Bill 2230 and welcome to committee Michael Hale, Deputy General Counsel with Kansas Department of Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Michael Hale with the Department of Revenue. This is a bill that was introduced last year and continuing on to this year. It didn't get any traction because of the COVID matter. And I do want to thank Adam for clarifying a little bit about why there are so many changes in the code. And like he pointed out, it is largely due to rearrangements. So he did a nice job of that, and I appreciate it. Do want to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all. Just very briefly, and the committee's heard this before, the Kansas sales tax was originally enacted in the 1930s. And at that time, it was largely imposed on sales of tangible personal property. And this was normal for states across the country. At that time, consumer consumption was 60 to 65% property and 35 to 40% of services. And so this gave a nice base to the states to fund their roads and bridges and schools and police and all that good stuff. Post-war and post-depression, really starting in the 60s, consumer purchasing habits began to shift kind of away from tangible property and now consuming certain services. And this was largely driven by having additional cash in their pocket because of economic conditions that improved dramatically, but also changes in technology. I'm probably going to date myself here a little bit, but back in the 30s, there was no such thing as a stereo or a hi-fi. By the 60s, just about every teenage kid had hi-fis. So technologies were changing, and services were being purchased more and more. The Kansas legislature has had a history in the past of keeping up with these technological changes. So, for example, in the 70s, when cable and satellite television started coming online and becoming more prolific across the country, the legislature amended our sales tax code to include the subscription services for cable and satellite television and radio. Then the internet hit in the 90s, and there was an explosion of commodities now available on the internet. A lot of these commodities could be digitized and sold in a digital format. So, for example, books, movies, and it can be streamed right into your home for a price. Well, the technology has outstripped a lot of the tax codes. And now consumer consumption today is more like 65% services and 40% property. So it's kind of flipped. As a result, and there's been two results of this, or two results because of this. One, small in-state brick and mortar businesses like bookstores have been really harmed. They've lost a lot of market share to online products. And two, the sales tax base has shrunk dramatically. In the 70s, the sales tax base was about 54% of personal income. Now, it's more like 6% of personal income. That's a dramatic drop, largely due to consumption of services as opposed to property. Now, the legislature would have two options to address this. One, increase sales tax rates. And a lot of states, including Kansas, did that. But because the base was shrinking, they had to increase rates more and more often to just keep up. The other option is to broaden the tax base, to bring back into the base what has been eroded away by internet sales of digitized product. Now, states over the last 10 to 15 years have included digital products into their sales tax base. About 67%, or 2/3 of states that have a sales tax, have done this. That's allowed them to expand their tax base without having to raise their tax rates, and it's helped to provide their in-state businesses with relief, if you will. It's not really a relief, but requiring the out-of-state companies that are selling these products to compete on the same level playing field as the in-state brick and mortar bookstores and record shops that are operating in your communities today. If that's starting to sound a little familiar, it's because the rationale for marketplace facilitators that you heard last week, a level playing field for in-state businesses, applies to this bill too. This provides a level playing field for in-state brick and mortar businesses that are trying to compete with the multinational, multi-billion-dollar out-of-state providers of these products. There's no difference in the rationale between this bill and the facilitator bill. Now, how significant are these sales? And I point out in my written testimony that you can see there, just in the United States alone, 55 billion with a B per year in sales. That's about $500 million to the state of Kansas. If you'll note, over 75% of all of these sales are games. Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Candy Crush, and so on. Now let that sink in for just a minute. We're not talking about food and water. We're talking about games. 75% of all digital sales are games. Now, Tax Foundation and the Urban Institute both agree that including digital products in a state's tax base can be used to at least halt the erosion of the tax base that's been going on over the past decade or two. And in 2019, the Tax Foundation and Kansas Chamber pointed out that broadening the sales tax base by including digital goods could be used to provide tax relief in other areas that the legislature may choose. This bill does all of that. So in conclusion, the legislature has a history of adapting our tax act to conform to technologies as they arise over time. And that's what this bill does. The Kansas sales tax, which has been eroding dramatically since the 90s in particular, would be reconfigured, if you will, or reformed by adopting House Bill 2230. The current state of affairs, simply not fair to our in-state businesses that are trying to compete against the large out-of-state multinational corporations. This bill levels that playing field so that the out-of-state companies have to be on the same footing with our in-state companies. Over 67% of other states that have a sales tax have reconstituted their tax base by including these digital products in their base. That's what this bill does and nothing more. And Main Street organizations like Tax Foundation and the Urban Institute encourage this broadening of the base to include digital products. And House Bill 2230 does that. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I stand for any questions the committee may have.
Committee, I think we'll go ahead and take questions now. Are there any questions for Mr. Hale? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It caught my eye when the revisor went through this, but then on page 19 of the bill, line 18, am I understanding this correctly? You've put in here that if you purchase items illegally, they are subject to tax, and this is a way to go after them. Is that how I read that?
No, what that is addressing is a format in how you can deal with digital property. In some cases, you purchase the digital property, you have a right to permanently use that property. There are other times where you simply have a right to access or retain this property. So you keep it for a certain period of time. It's kind of like when, you remember Blockbuster or Family Videos? You would go and get your VHS tape. Yes, that's how old I am. You get your VHS tape, take it home. They'd have tiers. You could keep it for one night for like $3 or the weekend for $5. But you didn't have a right to keep it. And so this bill would include the fact, because the internet operates the same way, you can download a movie from one time, or you can buy the movie. This particular section makes sure that both are going to be taxed, just like if you rent something today, it's taxed.
I'm not an attorney, so I'll ask one, whether that first sentence, regardless of whether changes the meaning of the following, but I'll check that later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your testimony, David. I do, and I just, as I look at this, it seems very similar to the marketplace facilitators issues that we've been looking at. And so in asking that, I just wonder, do you know what is happening in other states, or can you comment about that, or is that something we'd have to look to the legislative research for, or can you give us that information?
Sure. As far as digital products?
Yes, sir.
67% of all states that have a sales tax are currently taxing digital products. It's 30 states plus the District of Columbia.
Thank you.
Mr. Hale, I don't mean to get into the weeds here, and I am embarrassed that I know that this well, but with little kids, I know, and I'm going to blame my kids, not that I don't have any games on my phone or iPad or whatever, but a lot of times the game, the download, the app is free, and then there are purchases within the app if you want to, for create modifications or do certain upgrades in the program, okay, I'll just call it a game. It's a game. How is that considered taxable good too, where it is a purchase to upgrade the app, even though the initial app was free?
Yes, those would be included in the tax base. So, for example, in Call of Duty, you can purchase additional armor or more ammunition that allows you to continue to play the game. That would all be included in part of the tax base.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions? Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, good to see you. Today, well, a couple of questions. Number one, today, I pay sales tax on my Dish TV service, but I don't pay any sales tax on Netflix, any streaming services that I receive via Wi-Fi to my television, correct?
It depends on how the service from Netflix is configured. If it is a subscription, and Netflix has that option to subscribe to their service, current Kansas law would have that in the tax base. But then you have layers within Netflix that you can rent a movie, so to speak, or rent games. That piece we're not getting into our base. This bill.
Well, I can tell you, I don't pay sales tax on Netflix. And I look at my bill every year or every month that hits my credit card, and either it's not divided out or it's incorporated in the total cost. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So I don't know. It's not broken out, so I'm assuming I'm not paying sales tax, but who knows?
You may be right.
And then the second question is, when it could be a concern of legislators that how do these companies remit sales tax, sort of going back to like the marketplace facilitator. Can they utilize Streamline since we're part of the Streamline sales tax?
Sure.
Or could you address that?
Yes, they can use Streamline sales tax. A lot of the larger platforms, they're already collecting tax in other states. So they would be able to, I would think, without, I'm not an IT person, but they should be able to transfer the technology over to additional states as they come online. A lot of the tax calculations are based on GPS coordinates of where your TV is, or your iPad, or your cell phone. But yes, they could use Streamline.
So to follow up that, if I'm visiting relatives in Indiana and I purchase an app on my phone, does the sales tax go to where I am located at that moment?
No, it'll go to your mailing address where your bill is sent.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you for coming today. I think one of the situations you brought up was it would kind of level the playing field for the brick and mortar stores.
Yes.
I think the brick and mortar stores have been pretty well taxed out of existence with property tax and just problems. And the other thing is, it seems like to me that Kansas ranks, I think, number 8th right now for sales tax and number 5th or 6th for outward migration. And I'd like a list, I mean, if any of the legislators on this committee who have been called by their constituents begging for another tax, I would love for them to raise their hand. I think Candace is taxed literally to death on about everything we touch. And I like your presentation, but I can't see that with the way the constituents are now that they need any more money coming out of their pocket. Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Well, if I might, the small bookstores that are in Main Street, Kansas, when they sell a copy of Huckleberry Finn, they have to collect sales tax. But a large internet provider on the West Coast or in another country sells the exact same book online, they don't pay sales tax. The book reads, it's the exact same book. So on the one hand, the Main Street business here in Kansas is having to collect and remit, and they're having to try and compete with an out-of-state company that doesn't. That's not fair. This bill equalizes that.
Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a second time. This question has been brought up a couple of times with constituents, especially in my county. Where I live in the county, my address is in Pot County, but I live in Wabaunsett County. So when I buy and sales tax is collected, you said it goes by your address. Does that mean it's the zip code?
It would be the actual physical location. So GPS will not give just the zip code. It's going to show your exact physical location.
Well, so you're telling me then that when I buy something and the tax is collected, part of that goes to Wabaunsett County and not to Pot County?
That would be my understanding, yes.
I'd have to think about that. Thank you.
Representative Kessler. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Just a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be really clear on what I just heard. Are you telling me you're expecting Netflix to, well, let me back up here. I don't know how many different tax jurisdictions we have in Kansas, but I know there's many. Every city, county, different tax base, different tax numbers. I know my businesses, I have several different tax jurisdictions just in the small amount of stores I have. But what you're asking, part of this streamline, is that Netflix will have to understand all of our different tax jurisdictions in the state of Kansas?
They do that already. They're already doing it. And it's all based on your GPS location. Amazon's doing the same thing. Walmart's doing the same thing. They have the computer programs already built in. It's already happening. They're not going to have to go out and retool. It's already occurring.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in response to the representative's question, I live in the county, and when I buy things and have it delivered to my house, like from the lumber yard, I don't pay city sales tax because it's out in the county. My address is not inside the city limits, so I don't have to pay that city tax. That's already been computed in there. Everybody has that in their deal, but if you don't tell them where you live and you run it to their cash register in the store when you go in there, then you pay the sales tax at that point of sale. It's destination and point of sale. And what he's referring to is destination sales tax, where you live in rural Kansas out in the county. You know, once again, like on property tax, we don't pay the city tax. We save about 40% by living outside the city limits. Unless, of course, your city is very aggressive and annexes you, which we've known a few to do. But anyhow, that's how that works. So, yeah, and it's already done. I'm living the dream. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to do with computers. Thank you.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, ultimately, the $50 million in estimated revenue will be paid by our constituents, not by Netflix and others, correct?
Yes, just like Netflix
Okay.
collects currently on some of their things.
Can you, at the department there, figure out how many basis points we could reduce our sales tax rate to offset that and make it revenue neutral?
Approximately 1%. 0.1%.
So then we're talking 6.4 statewide, right?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
We have a question online. Representative Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, if you account for inflation, the percentage the state has, I guess, increased in their rates with sales tax versus the inflation increase on personal income, if you knew the difference, or if we could get research to find that difference, if that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would she be able to rephrase that? I didn't follow.
Okay, so the income that the states received on sales tax, if you account for inflation, has it increased more or less than accounting for inflation on the general public's income over the last 30 years?
Okay, I'm following you. I don't know if we can check that. We can look at it and get back to you. I don't have that. I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your testimony. In relation to vehicles, some of these new companies are actually delivering a vehicle to your address as opposed to going in town and point of sale. The city versus the rural, is vehicles treated any different from what Representative Baker said, or is that something else?
That would not be a digital good, and so that would not be subject to this bill. But the tax would be predicated on where the car is going to be garaged. So that's normally your home. So if they deliver to your home, that's where the tax base is going to be.
Thank you, sir. I wish I'd known that about 2 months ago.
Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, just a correction, maybe not a correction, but Representative Mason asked you, I think the reduction on state sales tax, what 50 million would reduce that by, and I might be wrong, but I always thought it's about 60 million per 1% reduction. Is that correct?
It's point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Chairman Smith has just straightened me out. I'm still back on sales tax on food.
Yeah, it'd be
at 6.5.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so 1/10 of 1%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I might make just a quick comment, following up with Representative Mason. You know, it's nice to broaden the tax base, and I think that's what we should be doing. But if you would look at the revenue that you're going to generate if we would pass Marketplace Facilitator and digital goods, it's probably up around $90 to $100 million. And guess what? We could maybe reduce, we could give some tax breaks to corporations. We could maybe reduce some taxes for individuals. So just, keep that in mind as we move forward.
And the Tax Foundation and the Kansas Chamber pointed that out in their 2019 report, that there's an alternative to reducing rates, and that is to provide tax relief in other parts of the code. So as Representative Cartner just pointed out, if 0.1% reduction in sales tax isn't quite good enough, then you could use these proceeds to offset other areas in the tax code.
Committee, I think we'll take one more question, then move on to our next conferee. I have Representative Baker.
Thank you. Just a quick note. Yesterday in Ag Budget, we had a discussion about people that the state of Kansas owes money to already that we need to take care of. The majority leader graced us with his presence and told us that should be a priority. And I've sat in this committee for several years now, and we have at least $300 to $600 million worth of people that we owe money to here in the state of Kansas, whether it's the retailers. From a bill we heard earlier this year, we owe them 120 to 140 million of prepaid sales tax. We have grocery coupon sales tax to address. We did address $4.5 million with the car dealers. We have a lengthy list of people we owe money to, and it would be my position that we probably need to pay some of those people that we've been owing money to for a long time and get them squared back up before we start giving money away again. Thank you.
Thank you, committee. And Mr. Hale, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Our next proponent conferee is Trey Cocking with the League of Kansas Municipalities, and he is joining us via WebEx. Welcome to committee, Trey.
Chairman, thank you for allowing us to testify on this bill. We view this bill as a Main Street Fairness Act. I just have to go back to when I was a student here at Washburn University 20 years ago, thinking of the record stores that we went to buy CDs and the number of Blockbusters that we went to rent movies or rent video games. Those are all gone today. In fact, there were 4,500 Blockbusters at one point in this nation, and there's one left in Bend, Oregon today. Really not part of the franchise, but I think people are trying to keep the name alive. So this is really about fairness. This is about helping with a stream of revenue that once existed that has been diminished. As now, I think a lot of people have not rented a movie or rented a game in person in the last 5 years. It's gone all virtual. When you can do something from the convenience of your home, you're gonna do that versus going out to a store or anything else. So I think it's a matter of fairness for the remaining small town bookstores. You can still buy video games at stores. At least my nephew has told me that. So I really think it's a matter of fairness and trying to give our Main Street businesses the best equal footing that we can. So we are strong promoters of this legislation, and we just ask that you guys try to level the field for folks in Kansas. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Corbett.
One of the questions that I was asked about, if something like this does happen, you've got your streaming services and you've got your sales tax on cable and other TV services, and cities have their never increasing franchise fees that kind of keep businesses kind of where they're at. Do you see any way that you'd be interested in maybe cutting any of the sales taxes on any of the cable services or franchise fees to kind of offset this a little bit?
Representative Corbett, at the end of the day, I'm always property tax first and foremost is where I'd want to cut. I view cable as cable, at least with my Netflix purchases, Hulu subscription, I view that as, something extra that we can afford in our budget. And at the end of the day, if we can deliver property tax relief by having a stronger sales tax stream, that's what I would prefer.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none in the room and none online. Trey, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for allowing us to testify.
Committee, I would draw your attention to written-only testimony from Emily Fetch from Kansas Action for Children. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2230? Seeing none, we will move on to opponent testimony. And I have down Kent Eccles with the Kansas Chamber as verbal testimony. Welcome to committee.
There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. 2 days in a row. You got me thinking. I'm Ken Eccles, Kansas Chamber, by the way, here in opposition to 2230. And when the chairman was talking about whether it was his kids, wink, wink, or him on his phone. I've looked up, I have my credit card in my Apple Wallet, and it's linked to my son's PlayStation 4, and it's also linked to his iPad, and I can, that way I can keep track of what he's buying. He has to ask me first, but you know, there's a apple.com charge on here for $5.46, so that was a $4.99 in-app purchase, but I got charged tax on it. I thought that was interesting. There's another one for an Apple that was $19.99, but the charge is $21.88, so I got charged on that. And then on Netflix, it was $15.99 a month, just flat, no tax. It's interesting how that works, that they charge you tax for in-app purchases, but not for a subscription service. So I think this bill would change that. Anyway, thought it was interesting, and I'd share that with you. You already heard a lot from the Department of Revenue about what the bill does. You know, this came from the Governor's Tax Council, one of their recommendations. And the Department of Revenue mentioned that the Chamber commissioned the Tax Foundation to do a Kansas tax modernization study, if you will, back in 2019. And we did, and what that study recommended was if you're gonna, you know, broaden the base, which is what this bill does, clearly, you should also lower the rate. And the reason we're here in opposition to this bill is because the bill doesn't do that. It doesn't set aside that 0.1% and take it from 6.5 to 6.4 or whatever. So it doesn't do that. And, you know, Kansas has the 8th highest combined state and local sales tax rate in the country. So we're in the top 8. We think that if you're going to move forward with something like this, you should apply it to reducing the rate. So this bill doesn't do that, and that's why we're here in opposition. I'll stop there and take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eccles. Committee questions? Representative Helgerson?
So if I offer an amendment to the bill and it reduces to the same amount of tax increase that's generated in the bill, but in a reduction, you'd be in favor of it?
Yeah, we'd have to go back and talk to our board and our members and have that discussion.
Great, thank you.
Further questions? Looks like you get off easy today. Thank you for your testimony.
Thanks. Yep.
Committee, I draw your attention to written-only testimony from Dave Traubert from the Kansas Policy Institute. I do not show any neutral testimony. Is there anyone wishing to appear as an opponent or neutral on House Bill 2230? Seeing none, we will close. Oh, yes. Representative Helgerson.
Before you close, I have a question either for the department or for research.
Go ahead.
You know, there's going to come a point where some smart aleck like me is going to get their phone service and go to some X county and X state that has very little sales tax or no sales tax and have that service for my phone added on to the web, you know, out there. My address is henryhelgerson.com, and then my Netflix and everything is going to go to the cloud. I can see a point where there's going to be a heaven out there for tax evaders or for people that realize that I can avoid sales tax because it's going to the cloud, and then if I'm in California, I pull it off, but it's not going to go to California because I'm getting it from the cloud. It's not going to go to Kansas, it's going to come from the cloud. And I'm going to keep moving around unless we are smart enough to put together a jurisdictional sales tax that starts dropping money from the cloud, like we're talking about, or what's done for businesses. Now, if I'm mistaken, I'd like to be corrected, but that's what I see happening in 6 months or 5 years from now, because somebody's going to come up with this kind of a model. So I'm asking the department and I'm asking research, am I way off, or you're not going to be able to collect those funds anyway from there? It's a question. What do you want to answer?
Chairman, I'll take a stab at it, Mr. Chairman. Again, Michael Hale, Department of Revenue. What the representative is suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Representative, you would no longer have a physical place. Everything would be gone through the cloud. So your mail would go to the cloud. Your tax returns would go, everything would go to the cloud. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's eventually where I see us heading, somewhere down the road. And
Yeah,
I guess, and if that happens, it's going to weaken our tax structure even more because we're going to be individuals that may have a permanent residence in one location and will pay property taxes, or we may not, and the landowner will pay the property taxes. But I get all my services up in the cloud, and the services aren't really destined for a home location. They're up in the cloud area. And we don't tax the cloud, right?
We tax cloud applications under this bill, but you're right. At this juncture, the technology is not there yet, but you may be right where there could be technology being worked on right now where everything will be done through the cloud. At that point in time, the legislature may have to come back and relook at this issue, as will every other state in the union. Yeah. Oh, and probably the IRS will have to take a look at it because now you may be in the cloud in Ireland. So we're not there yet technologically. Currently, Kansas law, as with most states, is destination based, as Representative Baker pointed out. So where you're getting your mail right now would be the destination for the sales tax. But yeah, you're eventually right. Technology, I mean, we look at Star Trek and from the 60s and thought, well, that's fantastical. And a lot of Star Trek is now reality. I don't know what technology holds in store for us in the future, but at that point, the legislature may have to come back and address.
For that, I would just say, beam me up, Henry. Okay, committee, we will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2230 and open up the hearing on Senate Bill 21. And I would turn to the revisor's office for a brief overview. This is a sales tax, a countywide sales tax authority on Cherokee County. And look to the revisor for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 21 would validate the results of an election held on November 3rd of 2020 in Cherokee County. As stated above, the Section 1 would approve the result of the election, successful election, where the question submitted by the Board of County Commissioners to the Cherokee County to increase the retailer sales tax by 0.5%. The revenue received by the county would be expended solely for the purpose of financing ambulance services within the county, renovations and maintenance of county buildings and facilities, or any other projects within the county deemed necessary by the governing board of Cherokee County. The sales tax 0.5% would terminate prior to January 1 of 2033, so approximately, I believe, 12 years. Section 2 of the bill provides that the Board of County Commissioners to levy the tax, essentially fix the rate according to the increase. And lastly, the bill would take effect from and after its publication in the Kansas Register. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sievers. Committee, any questions? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this, we've done several of these in the past few years. Most of them are in 5 or 10 year. Is this kind of uncommon, or is my memory failing me?
I think it's kind of a range between 5 to 15 years. I'd have to look a little more closely, but I wouldn't say it's out of the ordinary for a 12-year, but we don't usually do 12, but it's kind of within that 10 to 15-year range time period of when they expire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Corbett.
just to follow up on that, they've already voted in Cherokee County for what we're seeing today. Is that correct? You're just asking permission? They already had
That
the
is
vote for
correct.
Gray. Okay, thanks.
Just for further clarification, Mr. Siebers, they've had the election. This is extending, is this a new tax or is this extending an existing rate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a little bit of history may be beneficial. It's my understanding they had a 0.5%, another 0.5% sales tax that was currently or previously existed, I believe, to build a jail or something. I can't recall exactly. They fulfilled that, the reason for that sales tax, and it's my understanding that they were a little misinformed as to being able to hold a new election to use a new sales tax to essentially replace that sales tax of the 0.5% for a different reason. The legislator had never given them that authority to use it for the reasons they wanted to use it for, which were I listed previously. So they couldn't continue essentially that 0.5% with just an election. They have to come to the legislator to receive additional authority to use that sales tax for the reasons they now want to use it for.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, last year, I think it was last year, we had a situation in Finney County where they had done a similar sales tax and then they had already began collecting that. According to what you said, their authority has expired for the prior project.
That is my understanding. I can't speak for Cherokee County, but that's my understanding is the impetus for why they held an election to have essentially the continuation of the sales tax, but go towards a new directed towards new uses.
Okay, and perhaps we can have somebody from Department of Revenue address that as well. Committee, any questions for the revisor? Seeing, Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a second time. Is it legal to have an election and pass a bill without our permission to do that?
It's not illegal. It's just that the Department of Revenue won't collect the sales tax. So while they held the election and passed the continuation of the 0.5%, currently, it's my understanding, and Revenue can correct me if I'm wrong. Essentially, the retailers are not collecting that 0.5%. So even though they held the election, that sales tax is not currently in effect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for the revisor? Seeing none, Adam, thank you for your presentation. Do we have anyone from Department of Revenue that would like to address, not that there's a fiscal note to the state, but that could address the questions that the committee had asked?
Mr. Chairman. Right here? Okay, sorry. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Amy Kramer with the Kansas Department of Revenue. And this is a local impact only bill, so there is not a state fiscal note. And just to address some of the committee's questions, Cherokee County did hold an election in November. And for a little background, they had a 1/2-cent sales tax, and the debt service associated with that tax had been met. And so they had a misunderstanding on that tax. They went ahead and held an election to basically replace those purposes, keep the 1/2-cent tax and use it for different purposes, but they didn't have the legislative authority to do that. So we did end up sunsetting that 1/2-cent sales tax. That sunset will take effect April 1st, 2021. And that is due to the timing on when they needed to notify us, and then subsequently the timing that we're statutorily required to give the business community so they have adequate time to update their systems with the new rates.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Department of Revenue? Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, we went through this last year with Finney, as the chairman has already pointed out. And isn't there a process that if they want to renew, does the county have to come to you to notify you so we can get a legislation in place to authorize? Tell me a little bit, or the committee, about that process, please.
Well, normally if the county has statutory authority, which means that they're under the 1% general sales tax rate, or they are they have an election for a healthcare related sales tax, then they can just hold the election, and then we will work with them to get the tax implemented at the appropriate time. There are a handful of counties, and you can see those listed in the bill, that have come to the legislature to ask for county authority for items other than a general sales tax or other than exclusively healthcare items, and they have to come to the legislature for that because they don't have statutory authority for that. In the Cherokee County situation, they asked for things that they did not, their election included things that did not fall under those categories, and their rate was already at their 1% cap. So their request is for you to validate their election so that we can implement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Committee, are there any other questions for Department of Revenue? Seeing none, thank you for that clarification. Committee, at this time, we will open up proponent section or proponent testimony for Senate Bill 21, and we would like to welcome first to committee Kyle Rennie, Cherokee County Clerk, and they will be joining us online.
Representative Adam Smith, thank you for the opportunity to testify by WebEx today. It's the desire of Cherokee County to ask your wisdom and your consideration for the passage of Senate Bill 21. We were just misinformed about how to go about it, and it was innocently and ignorantly, just to be real honest, and we ask for your consideration. This question was on our ballot in the 2020 November 3rd election, just as a continuation. We worded that as a continuation instead of a new tax. Our county commission thought it would be easier to present to the residents of the county as a continuation instead of a new tax. There is no new tax dollars involved here. We just were misinformed about how to go about it. And we just ask your consideration and passage of 21, SB 21. And I stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for the conferee? If not, I have one. What was the vote count on that?
I think it passed by 3/4. 3/4 yes, and maybe a fourth no.
Okay, thank you. Last chance for any questions. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, and I am assuming that Caden Wimmer is your partner on the screen there.
Yes, this is Caden Wimmer, the deputy clerk.
Yes, welcome to committee, Caden.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and distinguished members of the committee for allowing me time to come and testify to you today. We wish we could be there in person, but this morning we couldn't find gas for our snowmobiles, and we couldn't find the reins for our dog sled. So we apologize, but one good thing that we can see in the slide in this day of age of COVID is having opportunities like these to where we can still be able to testify in front of you today. I'm not going to take up too much of your time to talk about my written testimony. I feel it sums it up much that the citizen that we were misinformed whenever this went out for the election. And so the citizens of Cherokee County widely agreed to adopt this standard so we can provide extra funding for our ambulance services, especially now in the age of COVID 2019. Our first responders have always been the backbone of this great nation. And even during this pandemic, those heroes answer the call yet again. And the money generated from this sales tax will go to keeping them safe for the necessary equipment, keeping our citizens of Cherokee County safe, but also keeping the families safe for our first responders and emergency medical services. And again, to piggyback off what my boss said, is that this will not increase any new sales tax dollars compared to last year, even though this is coming as a new tax per se, but no new sales tax dollars will be implemented, no extra going forward into this next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions?
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is John Alcala. I have a question.
Yes, John, go ahead.
So maybe I'm getting a little old here, but and I might have asked this question last time this came up. Why is the state approving sales tax for Cherokee County and not the county's Board of Commissioners?
The Board of Commissioners did approve this tax. It just, the way we worded it on the ballot was a continuation instead of a new tax. They did approve that in open meeting, and just the way we went about it was incorrect. And quite simply, we were just ignorant of what we're doing because of misinformation that came from our county council at that time. If we had been advised a little bit better, we would have not went down this road.
So maybe I'm getting repetitive here. So why couldn't they not correct it? Why couldn't the county not correct it again on the next ballot of elections this fall?
This fall, we're under another shortfall from another angle, and we're trying to maintain our budget the way it is. We were under speculation that we were going to be losing quite a piece of revenue from a merger of some hospitals here in Cherokee County, and we just were informed that we are going down that road, and we're just trying to maintain our budget.
Do we have any of the county commissioners as proponents? Mr. Chair, I don't have my document.
Representative, I believe we have written testimony. We do not, I don't show that anyone is appearing as a verbal testimony, county commissioner wise. We do have 2 county commissioners and then also Kansas Association of Counties as written only testimony.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I might add, unless I'm misunderstanding, that even if they would negate the election results of 2020, if they would wish to continue this sales tax and take it up again for this purpose, they would still have to gain legislative authority to repurpose that sales tax.
That answers my question. Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wimmer?
Yes, sir.
Or Mr. Rini? I see on page 4 you've outlined what the money will be used for. What kind of money are we talking about with the collection of this sales tax?
This is approximately $600,000, and it would be about $600,000, and it would be used in our emergency medical services, and to maintain county-owned properties, maintenance on county-owned buildings and properties. And that's how it was worded on the ballot.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony, and I would like to personally thank you for readjusting your schedules. We originally had this hearing scheduled for Monday, and we had to cancel our tax meeting, so thank you for being flexible with your schedule.
You bet. Chairman Smith, if you'd like the numbers on the election, it was 6,517 yes, 2,307 no.
Thank you, sir. Okay, committee, at this time I'd like to address your attention to written-only proponent testimony from Corey Motes, District 3, Cherokee County Commissioner, Lori Johnson, District 2, Cherokee County Commissioner, and also Jay Hall with the Kansas Association of Counties. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, as a proponent on Senate Bill 21? Seeing none, we will close proponent testimony. I show no neutral or opposing testimony. Is there anyone wishing to appear as an opponent or neutral? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 21. Committee, we do have a few moments, and I would like to get through a few bills. Simple, whoops, I said simple. Never do that. We have, on our schedule, we had Senate Bill 47, which is the Kansas Taxpayer Protection Act, and House Bill 2105, which was a remote workforce bill before the committee. I would like to get those worked rather quickly here if possible. So I would like to look at Senate Bill 47 first. This is the Kansas Taxpayer Protection Act, and I would turn to Revisor Siebers for a brief overview while everyone pulls up their information and files for Senate Bill 47.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 47, like you stated, would enact the Kansas Taxpayer Protection Act. Essentially, it would govern the actions of paid tax return preparers who assist taxpayers filing income tax returns or refund claims in Kansas. Again, the act would govern these preparers that would require a signature of the paid tax return preparer and the preparer's Federal Internal Revenue Service ID number on the return. The act imposes a civil penalty of $50 on a tax return preparer for failure to do so. It also authorizes the Secretary of Revenue to bring actions against tax return preparers from engaging in any prohibited conduct. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for the revisor? Seeing none, thank you for your overview. Committee, what are your wishes with Senate Bill 47? Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that we pass Senate Bill 47 favorably out of committee.
Thank you. And a second from Representative Helgerson. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, John Outlaw, real quick. This is the bill that passed 118 to 1 last session, right?
I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion, committee? If not, Representative Gardner, you may close.
I close, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Gardner to recommend Senate Bill 47 favorable for passage. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Does anyone want their vote recorded? It appears the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Second bill would be House Bill 2105. And I would once again turn to the revisor's office for an overview on 2105.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2105 establishes withholding requirements for employees who work in multiple states. The bill requires that an employee be subject to income tax withholding only if in the state, only if the individual is a state resident or the employee works more than 30 days in a year in the state. There's certain employees, classes of employees, professional athletes, professional entertainers, production employees and certain public figures would not be included under this definition. Additionally, the withholding and income tax payment requirements would only apply if the state is entered in, or if the resident employee hails from a state that would have a similar exemption for up to the 30 days as Kansas. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for that overview. Committee, I apologize for not getting Patrick Mahomes in here for testimony on the hearing, but we will go ahead and proceed to work the bill anyway. What are your wishes on 2105? Chair recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move that the committee recommend House Bill 2105 favorable for passage.
Do I have a second? Representative Kelly on the second. Committee, any discussion? Seeing none in the room and none virtually, Representative Mason, you may close.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'll renew my motion.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Mason to recommend House Bill 2105 favorable for passage. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Anyone wishing to have their vote recorded? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Committee, that concludes our business for today. Thank you for your patience and attention. We are adjourned.